good questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ian, any questions for the assessor?
Just with respect to the rent comparables, you had indicated, Mr. Assessor, that many of these chain service garages were owner occupied. The 5 comparables that you have presented, are those, how are those rents determined? Or are those owner occupied?
These would not be owner occupied.
Okay.
These would be net leases that we have submitted to us through the income and expense process. And like I said, they're reviewed by our section. We try and gather as many comparables as we can. We don't have a large sample size for franchises, but this is the best we have here with 5. They're all in good locations. They're fairly newer, and they seem to represent that roughly $20 a square foot where we see these well-located franchise vehicle service garages renting for.
Thank you very much. I have nothing further.
I thank you. Mr. Assessor, you had talked about the previous assessment being around $1 million. So what came to light to bring down, I know we can't really talk about old assessments or anything like that, but I want to know, probably the rationale to bring it down to, you're down, $250,000 from where you were before. So
that was a factor of reevaluation of the basement space for these properties. A lot of the times they'll either have they call hoists or pits. Basically, there's two ways to work on a car, is my understanding. You can hoist the car up or you can go underneath. So a lot of these super loops had pits, and we were assessing them as basement space, like storage basement space, $6 a square foot, $8 a square foot, that type of thing. And it was determined by the department that that wasn't reasonable. The basements aren't high enough to really be leased out in any sort of way. So the basement value was effectively removed from a lot of these super loops. So we actually had a couple decreases in that regards through the data review process. And like I said, I'm not sure why this one was left at $1 a foot. It could just be because the model value that we were producing using only 2177 was just way too low for this property. Or it could have just been an oversight, but I would still recommend the 747 in total as a fair value, regardless of how you look at that, as 2177 plus $1 for the basement or 2277 altogether. I see it as a fair value.
Mm-hmm. Like you say, the dollar per square foot for the basement area seems to be maybe a little low.
It could be, yeah. If the space were rentable, it would certainly rent for more than that. I think the argument was made that, and in analyzing the income and expense information that we received from the few net leases that did exist, it didn't seem like they were paying a separate rate for the basements as well. So I think that probably played into why the department removed it.
Has there been any sales for these type of properties at all, or not?
Not since the vacant land sale in 2013 for this one.
Yeah. So we don't know whether to, say that there's like 4,000 square feet or, maybe half of that.
At the end of the day, it's the dollar value that matters, right? Regardless of how they want to categorize it with rates per foot or what the square footage is. And I see this as a fair rate.
Okay, I thank you. Mr. Rack, your presentation, and then I understand you have rebuttal, so we'll do your presentation and then we'll deal with the rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The assessor is correct. In 2020, the property was assessed at $1,027,000. The board reduced it to $513,000. So I'm going to go to my brief, and you'll see that the page 1, and you can see the basement picture in the middle there. 6-foot high ceilings. It's actually quite greasy down there. Those are oil storage tanks. That's why the basement would be unleasable. There's no separate entrance, and I don't think anybody would rent that basement. It just comes with the building for its purpose of changing oils. You'll see that the bottom picture is the hole that you can see down into the pit. This is not a franchise. This is a Manitoba-owned company. that was started in Manitoba. So these are not franchises. This is actually an owner-occupied company that was started here in Winnipeg. So if you go to page 2, you'll see what the assessors worked up. Page 3, you'll see the basement space is unleasable and would be included in the main floor. In the bottom of page 3, you'll see I have two, is a 2021, 2 shops on McPhillips Avenue that the rent is being advertised at $13 a square foot. And if you go to bottom of on page 5, you'll see the rate there at $13 a square foot for a service garage. And those are asking rents. They're still for rent today. So if you go to page 6, you'll see I have some comparables that were assessors comparables and appeals in 2020. You'll see that they range from 1152 down to 1644 with an average of 1373. And then the additional comparables on McPhillips and Miracle Dent and on an auto, which is month to month, so they would pay a little bit higher rent because it's month to month. And we get another average of about $13 a square foot. So I'm going to apply basically $13.50 per square foot. I don't know why they filled out that COVID information, because I spoke to the owner a couple of times about his properties. He actually called me about the appeal, and he was stating that he did see a reduction in business quite a lot. So I don't know why they filled that income expense mailer out the way they did, or the COVID information. So I'm using the main floor only at 1973 square feet, applying the department's parameters to get a total value of $444,000. And as the assessors, the next couple pages are just that the other properties today, the basement was removed. So the assessors already addressed that fact. And I don't know why they actually filled out that, why they said that they spent $740,000 on the property, because I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't that much for a residential property back in the day. That's an awful lot of That's an awful lot of money that's paid for a little house that they demolished. So I don't have an answer to that part of the equation. So that's basically my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. Questions of the applicant? Mr. Assessor?
Yes, please. You stated that this isn't a franchise, Lyle, because it began in Manitoba and it's concentrated in Manitoba. Can you tell me how many locations there are?
Super Lubes, they have 3 locations.
In Manitoba?
One on McPhillips. Oh, well, just in Winnipeg. There's one on St. Mary's. There's one on Regent, and there's one on McPhillips.
Can you speak to the quality and condition of the subject property? Have you been inside of it?
I've been in all the properties. They're all in average condition, except for the basements are pretty greasy and smelly because of the oil. But for an oil lube place, they're all in good condition.
And the sale price of $730,000, you're saying you don't think is correct, or you're not sure why they paid that?
Yes. I mean, when it was bought, it just had a little house on there, and that's an awful lot of money to pay for it. I mean, you wouldn't even pay that kind of money today for a property on St. Mary's.
Turning to your comparables on page 6. So you provided assessor comparables from 2020, correct?
That's correct.
Do you have updated leases for these? 2 of these leases are expired.
Yes, they're just on the cusp of being expired. I don't have new leases for those, but I imagine they wouldn't have changed much since it was pandemic period. I'm sure they would have signed for roughly the same amount, and I imagine if they were as high as the ones you're presenting, you would have had them in your brief.
Were you able to find any newer leases?
Just the additional comparisons Those are all new asking rents in 2021, and the 2 leases at the bottom on Regent Avenue.
You provided 2 asking rates for this property on McPhillips, and this is a strip mall, right? These are units within a larger complex. They don't have their own property.
That's correct.
Okay. And same
That's
with
correct.
the ones on Regent, right? These are strip mall properties.
That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any other questions. Thanks, Lyle.
I thank you. Ms. McFadden?
No, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
Okay. Ian, any questions?
No, I don't. I think they've all been dealt with. Thank you.
Okay. I think your cap rates are both the same, so it's just a matter of the rate per square foot, is it not?
Yes.
That's correct.
So I could just clarify. It's not so much the rate per square foot as the fact that you are actually charging rent for this 4,000 square feet versus the applicant applying the rent to only the half, correct?
Well, the applicant's applying $13 a foot, I think, or $13.50 to the 1,973 square feet.
Right.
We're applying $22.77 to 1,973 square feet, is what I'm saying.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Rack, you have rebuttal?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
All right, just give us a chance to get there.
Next one down.
Next one down.
They're all either 3. It's the just
Okay.
one up.
Went up.
There you
Okay. Okay. There?
Yep.
Okay. It's the third one. Everybody there?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Okay. Mr. Rack, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this rebuttal covers pretty well all the properties we have today. It's the same comparables that I'm using the same comparables, assessors using the same comparables. So you'll see the comparables he has here. And basically the information supplied in this rebuttal brief basically proves that basically Vitus Muffler, which is a franchise, they own that store and it's a pad lease. That's number 2. Number 3 is Fountain Tire, which is also a pad lease. Number 4 is Boyd Auto Body, which is not a service garage. They repair damage to your vehicle. Service garage is a building that has multiple doors on the front of it, and the building is very shallow so that they can bring cars in, fix them, and bring them out, and then put another car in and bring it out. An auto body shop is not set up that way. It's a large area because when the vehicles are brought in, they stay there for an awful long time to get fixed. And there are no lifts, and they do no oil changes or that kind of work in an auto body shop because the oils from that kind of stuff actually contaminates cars for painting. So you'll see that comparables, 3 of them are pad leases, and 1 is an auto body shop, and you'll see the one on McPhillips Avenue is as low as $1,550. Now the assessors, you'll see as we go through, is basically picked the highest values he could to defend the model. And the model from last year, or from 2020 assessment to this year, because they've taken the basement out, I guess the model's working on a smaller area. So the rents actually have increased anywhere from over $7 to almost $10 a square foot when they did that change to a smaller area. So if you keep going down, you'll see underneath that chart, comparison 3 and 4 are both in the same shopping center. So we come to comparison 1 of McPhillips. That's Fountain Tire Goodyear. That was built originally as a Goodyear store back in the day in 1967. That's what it was built as. And it's got a rent of $1,550, and that's not actually a rent for renting that building. That was built by Goodyear and now Fountain Tire. Goodyear and Fountain Tire are both owned by the same company, or they're amalgamation. So basically, as we'll go down and I'll show you, is that they're owner occupied, and this rent could be a rent, because I don't know for sure, that the manager would be paying in partnership with Fountain Tire. And that rent would be a turnkey rent for the entire operation. This is not an arm's length typical lease, as I'll show you as we go down below. Comparison 2 on Pembina Highway is a full service garage. It was built and owned by Midas Muffler, or it was built and owned by the individual who bought the franchise. And now this is a pad lease, and it's on land owned by the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. And the strange thing is with these is it's only a 1-year lease, the same as the McPhillips one above it. It's only a 1-year or a 1-year term, which seems strange for pad lease, but that's what it is. So the Winnipeg Health Authority would not build and finance the building. Typically a minimum term would be 5 years or 10 years, usually 10 years for a pad lease. So we go down to page 3, you'll see that's from the assessment department. That's the piece of land there that Midas Muffler is sitting on. And it's owned by the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority. And you'll see by the assessment that there's taxable school exempt. That would be the health authority. And then you get $972,000 would be for the Midas Muffler. And if you go down to the next page, page 4, you'll see a picture of the Midas Muffler on that site. There's a pad lease, and you'll see that it's the Winnipeg Health Authority front door and the building in the background. It's all on the same property. So now you go to the next comparison number 3. Now this is a property that is owned by Fountain Tire. Being in a mall, and you can see the picture in the bottom how huge that Southdale Shopping Center is. So they build on these pad sites because they get great visibility. Anybody traveling through that mall would see that building and then probably go to that building. So basically, a lot of companies, the bank is there, there's restaurants there, which makes it convenient going to get your car fixed, which might be an hour or 2 hours, and you can go shop around in the mall. But they go in those malls because they're great locations for visibility. That's the whole purpose of going there. And again, it's only a 2-year lease, and typically on a mall for a pad site, you usually sign for a 10-year lease. So I find that unusual. So now you get pictures of the mall, and you can see all the other buildings that are built. There's a strip mall, and basically what they call CRUs, commercial retail units that are built on the mall, such as Fountain Tire or a restaurant, etc. So you go to comparison number 4, which is Boyd Auto Body. And Boyd Auto Body, as I stated before, is not a comparable as a service garage. Although they're paying $20 a square foot, it's basically a retail conversion that was made for Boyd Auto Body. There's another one they've actually taken over on Henderson Highway, done the same thing, took over a grocery store. And again, it's a great location, and that would demand a higher rent in a big mall like that. And you can, if you go down a little farther, you'll see a picture of the back. There's 2 doors in the back. If you go to page 7, there's 1 door in the front. You can see there's a Taco Bell, KFC. That's another commercial unit, which would be a pad lease. So if you go down to comparison 5, the next page, you'll see it's basically Mr. Lube. Again, that's a pad lease, very short term. And you'll see on the bottom from page 8 going to page 9, you'll see it's on the same site as a Midas Muffler. So that's a pad lease. And you'll notice that all the pad leases are basically the same value per square foot, which is typical for that time in 2021, what they charge for pad leases. So you'll see that Mr. Lube is just across from the Midas Muffler. It's on page 9. So I assume that's a pad lease, or perhaps maybe the Midas owner had purchased that franchise and built that. I don't know, but I would assume by the price it's a pad lease. So if you go down where page 9 says, going to page 10, you'll see that that's one big parcel. This is taken from the City of Winnipeg assessment site. So basically it's one parcel at $1,769,000. So that would be both the Midas Muffler and the Mr. Lube. So going down further underneath to page 11, comparison nice number 2. So this is information on Midas Muffler franchises. This basically proves that they own the building. On the bottom page 11, you'll see the highlighted. There's just some information. I wanted to capture the whole sheet to see that it's one continuous explanation. But as you'll see the bold letters or writing, it says, strive to become the shop your customers think of first when they're thinking of servicing their vehicles. There are several ways for qualified candidates to enter Midas Muffler franchise program, including development of a new shop, purchase of an existing shop, conversion of your existing business, or purchase of a company-owned Midas location. So basically that tells you that they're owner-occupied. So as you go down to page 12 on the top there, it says expansion opportunities and offer guidance during the site selection process. Construction project managers provide shop design assistance and prototypical floor plans. We provide a variety of innovative proven resources and campaigns that will position your business as the auto shop service choice for consumers in the area. Financial investment, the minimum capital required is approximately $75,000 US for an existing 6-bay shop when available, and up to $459,000 US for a new 8-bay shop. Partner investor. So if you keep going down, you'll highlight it how to own a Midas Muffler franchise. So first of all, you have to pay the franchise fees. So basically, you need $495,000 US to start construction. You can purchase an existing shop, conversion of your existing business, or purchase a Midas-owned location. So the conclusion from this is basically all Midas locations are owner-occupied. The rent they pay is either a book rent or perhaps a land pad lease in the cases of comparison 2. So that's a pad lease. It's owner-occupied. Then on to comparison number 3, Fountain Tire. So this is information about Fountain Tire. Fountain Tire started in Alberta, and it's basically owner-occupied. They're a huge corporate entity that basically purchases land and builds their own shops. There is no franchise here. They actually own those shops. So if you go down to the bottom, you'll see that in the bottom paragraph, above page 13, underneath the picture of the car, it says, our outstanding service, infectious work ethic, and partnership spirit helped us grow. Managers who effectively meet the needs of the customers were offered ownership of the business, not the property, the business, through a 50-50 partnership in their operation, a system we follow today. So they allow a 50% partnership in the business. So it's not the physical store. So that rent on McPhillips, I would assume, is either a book rent or the manager is taking 50% ownership of that business, and he's paying Fountain Tire $15.50 a square foot for the entire store and everything in it and all the equipment. So they own all the stores. If you keep going down to page 14, you'll see that they basically sold 49% interest of our business to Goodyear Canada. So they're partnered with Goodyear and they own everything. And at the bottom of that, you'll see today we have stores spanning from British Columbia to Ontario. So then if you go to page 15, this is just an article that basically Fountain Tire now in 2012 purchased 50% equity stake in Royal's 9 northern stores. So they buy stores. They don't lease out, they buy. If you go down to page 16, you'll see basically Vancouver is that the Fountain Tire, which is 49% owned by Goodyear Canada and deals exclusively in Goodyear products. This was basically a article about them effectively partnering with Goodyear. So the conclusion from these articles is basically Fountain Tire owns their own locations. They do not pay rent. So if the store is in a shopping mall, it would be a pad lease, as the 3 comparisons that I've shown and the one that is on Southdale Shopping Mall. Those pad leases, you have to examine them because some of them are all inclusive Usually what it is they pay a pad lease rent and then they pay the taxes, but the common area charges are actually included in the rent. So now we keep going down and we'll see Mr. Lube. So Mr. Lube is basically was started in Alberta also, and they own all their stores. And they basically, to begin with, and then in 2010, if you go down to page 18, this is an article that Mr. Lube is selling 23 corporate-owned stores. So they sold their corporate stores to the people that were operating them, the managers that were operating. So if you go down to page 19, you'll see this is Franchise Canada, and it tells about Mr. Lube. How do you get a franchise for Mr. Lube? So if you go to the bottom, you'll see that the franchise fee, which says Mr. Lube and Tires, is $50,000. Investment required is between 1.5 million and 2 million. And that's enough to construct the building. So basically, people who run Mr. Lube actually own the building. They don't rent that off to Mr. Lube. They basically have to construct their own building. Design, and it has to be designed to meet Mr. Lube's specifications. So the bottom conclusion is that Mr. Lube's are franchises, but they're owner-occupied stores. And that's shown by the investment of $1.5 to $2 million plus franchise fees. So comparison number 5, that Midas Muffler Shop is actually, I would consider it a pad lease. If you keep going down, the assessors provided comparables for 1585 Henderson Highway. And you can look at all the comparables. So you can see that now he's supplied all these comparables that range from $750 all the way up to $29.30 a square foot. So there are lots of comparables out there. And unfortunately, I found comparables that I didn't put in my brief today that actually are around $13 a square foot. I didn't send them in late. But there are more than what's shown here. So basically, as you keep going down there, the rents for garages as low as $750. You'll see the comparison number 10 on Pembina Highway, and it's almost exact like the lube shops, except it doesn't have the pits, and that's leasing at $9. You go down to the highest rent in those comparables for the Henderson Highway property, at $29 a square foot, $29.30, you'll see this property actually is a service garage with gas pumps. So I'm assuming that Domo pays for the whole site and rents out the garage. And that's not comparable for that Henderson Highway property because there's a garage. But the funny thing is if you go down, these are the comparables on page 23, is that these are the comparables from the assessor. And you'll see that number 3 or number 4, they were paying $15.90 for the garage and the pumps. And then basically now the assessor's stating that the new lease is at $29.30. That's an increase of $13.40 per square foot. And I would have to say that that one is actually an error. I don't think anybody would pay an extra $13.40 a square foot. So removing the above comparable, the Watt Street, the gas pumps, the average is now $13.06 per square foot for all the assessors comparables, which are, there's 10 of them there. So my conclusion on all this is basically, if you go down to the summary, the next page, page 24, the best comparable would be the Goodyear McPhillips store when you compare it to the subject property, and that's basically on the physical site. It's a standalone. The other properties are actually on shopping malls and their pad sites. Number 2 is owner occupied with a pad lease, and I wouldn't say that's comparable because it's a pad lease. The Fountain Tire, number 3, is in the large shopping mall. They basically, that's a pad lease. And the Boyd Auto Body is a retail conversion of the shopping mall. That's not a service garage. So I'd say that's not comparable. And then finally, the 5th one is Midas Muffler. That's an owner occupied with a pad lease, and that's not comparable. So a comparable would be a standalone, like the subject property, and that would be the comparables the assessors presented for the Henderson Highway property. And you're looking at $13.06 per square foot. And that's evident by the McPhillips lease at $15.50 per square foot. So the assessors picked out 3 of the highest comparables he could find to defend the model, which I understand. And that McPhillips lease, I would suggest to you that actually that's for everything in the store. So just on the bottom, you'll see Avis Young is advertising for a site. So you can understand what a pad lease is. So basically they're showing a picture there and they're showing the pad site. So that's on the same properties that they're building. Excuse me. You're paying just to have your building on that site. You don't own the land. And then if you keep going down, there's another one at 1320 Concordia Avenue. It shows another pad site. So again, you don't own the property. You're just allowed to rent it. And that's my presentation on the rebuttal, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Cutler, questions in regards to the rebuttal?
Certainly. So you can find out who owns a company pretty easily by doing a company search, Lyle. Our staff did a company search on all 5 of these comparables to show that they're arm's length. Did you do a company search on any of them?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I don't have the capabilities of doing that company search. I just went by the information that's presented on the properties on the websites of Fountain Tire and Goodyear to show that they're actually owner-occupied properties.
Okay, and you'd agree, like I said, the second comparables table that's provided for the Henderson property, these are all mom and pop type non-franchise vehicle service garages.
You're talking about the comparables for Henderson Highway?
That's right. I said I was going to be presenting 2 comparable tables today. One that would be franchise, up around $20, and then a lower one of non-franchise, the one that you've included here with an average of $14.
And as I stated, that the subject properties are actually a mom and pop operation. They're not a franchise. They just have, they've just expanded to have multiple locations.
Isn't that what a franchise is?
No, franchises, you buy it off a corporate company and you pay that corporate company, in the case of Midas, I think it's about $50,000, no, about $30,000 or $50,000 a year to operate with their name. And then they supply you, Midas Muffler would supply you all the equipment, and they would supply you a discount on all the products you sell. The subject property is actually, like I said, it's a Winnipeg-owned company, and it only operates in Winnipeg. And I would consider that as a mom and pop operation. It's just they have a few locations.
You stated that the best comparable would be a standalone, correct? Like the subject property is a standalone?
That's correct.
The 4 comparables you provided in your brief are all strip mall properties, and 2 of them are asking rents, right?
That's correct.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
I thank you. Ms. McFadden?
I don't have any further questions.
Ian, any questions?
Just one with respect to the some of the comparables you were talking about, your supposition as far as leases go. Mr. Rack, do you have access to those leases at all, or have you examined those leases?
The leases I have examined are the ones that are on Regent, because that's my one of my properties. The McPhillips those are just advertisements on the internet for sale or for rent, and the other ones are basically assessor comparables.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
I thank you. Either party wants summation?
No, thank you.
No.
No? All right. We'll go to 3400 Portage Avenue. Mr. Cuffer, whenever you're ready.
Just one moment. Okay, so this is file number 22-3736, roll number 0754-8192500, street address 3400 Portage Avenue. This is another Super Lube Auto Center, similar to the last property we discussed. It's a little bit older, constructed in 1984. Again, 1 story. leasable area of 10,219 square feet on file, and a modeled 2023 assessment of $2,374,000 that we'll be recommending today. Page 2 of my brief. You can see an overhead view of the property here. So it's across from Cavalier, kind of down in that Westwood area, right on Portage. It's actually 2 different buildings. So you can see that we have added together. And then page 3 of my brief has the Google Street View. You can see what it looks like from the front. Page 4 of my brief has the same rent comparable table discussed. Like I said, these are similar vehicle service garage type properties, all on net leases, all verified to be arm's length, with an average of about $20 a foot. So that's what we're using as comparables for this property. Page 5 of the brief has our income value workup. So we have C2 space and C6 space. In this case, the C6 space, it's not basement. This is actually storage / mezzanine, I believe. So we are counting it and including it here at a discounted rate, as you can see, close to about $10 a foot. The rest of the building, the actual vehicle service garage, like I said, we have up around $20 a foot, 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, a $6 shortfall. And the capitalization rate is quite a bit higher for this one, given that it's not a newer building like the last property was. So we're capping this one at 7.25%, which is how you arrive at that value of $2,374,000. Again, this is an owner-occupied property, so we have no rents to go off of. So we're using these same comparables that were previously discussed. Nothing else really of note in the brief, other than, again, they filled out the COVID questionnaire at the bottom there, saying that there was no impact as a result of COVID-19 on their operations. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rath, questions?
No, I think I've covered all the questions on the last property. I have no questions.
I thank you. Linda?
No question.
Ian?
I just have a question with respect to the owner-occupied evidence that you gave. I see on page 1 that it's a Superlube, but the owner is Russo Brothers Limited.
That's right.
Is that the same ownership as the previous property? Because that was a numbered company.
That's right. So different entity, but I believe all under the same umbrella.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have no real questions. So Mr. Rack, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you can see some pictures on page 1. The assessor did remove, or the department did remove the basement space, which I argued for many years. There is a storage of 2,515 square feet on the second floor. If you keep going down, you'll see the mezz. If you go to page 2, you'll see the department's using a net rent of $1,784 overall. You'll see the mezz space is actually just storage space on the top, and you'll see where the tires on the left-hand picture on the bottom is that mezz space is open to the area below. So fumes and smells would go up there. If you keep going down, you'll see my comparables from before, and basically go down to page 7. You'll see that I've used $1,350 for the service garage, $1,350 for the lube center, and I'm using $7 for the mezz, for an overall rate of $1,190. And if you use $1,190 on the last page, page 8, using the assessor's, the department's parameters, at 10,219 square feet at $1,190, I'm getting a value of $1,553,000, and that's my presentation. And just to note that the actual increase in value I'm asking for Well, that's okay, Mr. Chairman. That's all my presentation. Well, the increase in value, or the increase of value is actually, I think the department did increase the capitalization rate on this particular property from the last go around, which should make a difference in reducing the valuation. Yes, in 2020, the valuation was actually they used six point. That's my secretary. 6.55%. So they've increased it to 7.25%. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. Mr. Cupper, questions of Mr. Rack?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Linda?
No questions.
Ian?
No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay. There's a notation here, Mr. Rack, that the 2020 is at the municipal board.
That's correct. It's at the municipal board because of the basement space.
Because of what?
I think in 2020, the department was using basement space, full basement for this property. Now that they've changed and removed it, so I think the municipal board will be settled quite quickly since the department has moved to remove that basement space.
All right. Summation, either party?
No, thank you.
Mr. Rack?
So basically, the only summation is in 2020, the value is what the board reduced to 1,721,000, and basically I was looking for about 1.4 million. So today I'm looking at about 1.55 million. That's my only summation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. We'll go to the next property, which is 2026 Pembina Highway. Mr. Cuffer, whenever you're ready.
That's file number 22-3731, rule number 0305-392-0000, street address 2026 Pembina Highway. Another Superlube Auto Center, one story. This one was constructed in 1992 and has a leasable area of 7,699 square feet, which again, I think the applicant and I are in agreement on, and a model 2023 assessment of $2,241,000 that we'll be recommending today. If you turn to page 2 of my brief, you can see that we have no subject sale history for the property. I think they've been there since it was built in '92. You can see it is a really big piece of property. I think we have it over 40,000 square feet, right on the corner there of Pembina University Crescent. So another well-located BSG, in my opinion. Page 3 of my brief has a Google Street View showing it's right at that turnoff onto University Crescent there, or onto Bishop Grandin, sorry, and University Crescent. It's a Superlube, so I've used the same comparable table with the same five leases that I think represent the property well. Page 5 of my brief has the income workup. Again, we have two different areas. I don't believe either of them are basement space, total 7,699 square feet. Same modeled parameters used before, 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, a $6 shortfall. And this one with the capitalization rate of 7%, which is, I mean, probably a bit even on the higher end, given this is only a 1992 building. Page 6 of my brief has that income value summary, again, showing the estimated market value, $2,241,000 using the income approach. And again, this is a fully owner-occupied property, so we have no rents to go off of. They filled out the income and expense mailer to the best of their ability with with the book rent, the expenses that they paid, the square footage of 76.99, and then they filled out that COVID questionnaire again, saying that there was no impact on operations. So again, I'll be recommending the model value be maintained today at $2,241,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rack, questions?
No, I have no questions.
Linda?
No question, thank you.
Ian?
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Cutler, everything here is model driven?
That's correct.
Any overrides at all?
None that were made by me. I don't believe so. If there is a change to the capitalization rate, like Lyle was saying, our caps are higher this go around than they were for his last one. It could have been somebody had made a model value change at the time of the reassessment, but nothing recent and nothing that I've changed.
All right. Mr. Rack, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Page 1, you can see pictures. There's a municipal board pending for 2020, and that again is on the basement space. We continue going down. Basically, it's the same thing as the apartments using $21.55 per square foot. I've got the same comparables as shown before, and the same. If you go down the page, the last page, basically applying $13.50 the main floor rentable for the service garage and lube centers, 7,699 square feet, and a lease rate of $13.50. Applying all the parameters and the cap rate, I'm getting a value of $1,398,000. It was reduced to $1,671,000 by the board in 2020. Don't know how they came to that value. I was looking again for about 1.4 million, or a little less than that. So I'm looking for about the same value for the property today. I think with the pandemic, if you were leasing property at that time, you'd probably be paying the same as you would be paying in 2020. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. Mr. Assessor, questions of Mr. Rack?
No questions. Thank you.
And the questions?
No question, thank you.
Ian, questions?
No questions on this one. Thank you.
Okay. All right, summation, either party?
Nope.
All right, we're going to take about a 5 or 10 minute break for the time being. So we'll just shut it down here and reconvene at another 10 minutes, okay?
Thank you.
All right. So we'll call the hearing back to order and we will go to 1585 Henderson Highway. Mr. Cupper, whenever you're ready, you can take us through this property.
This is file number 22-3741, roll number 0400-100-8500, street address 1585 Henderson Highway. The owner of this property is actually the city of Winnipeg. It's leased to, like I've been saying, a smaller mom and pop type vehicle service garage. One story, constructed in 1961, so this is quite a bit of an older building. It doesn't look like the super lubes that we've been discussing so far today. Leasable area is only 1,972 square feet. The land area, however, is 16,581 square feet, and our 2023 modeled assessment is only 282,000, which I'll be recommending today. Page 2 of the brief shows no recent sales for the property. You can get an idea of what it looks like from the street there from Henderson Highway. You can see it's on the corner there. It's located between Douglas and the Chief Peguis Trail there. So this property and the adjoining property, I believe it's a garden center, they're both owned by the city of Winnipeg. And my understanding in having spoken to Mr. Rack previously about this property through the municipal board is that it's intentionally a buy and hold. The city's holding it for an eventual expansion of Henderson and Chief Peguis, but that's what I've gotten so far from the applicant. Page 3 at the bottom here, you'll see my rent comparables table. So as discussed, these are the lower ends, typically mom and pop type. There aren't 3, 4, 5 of them in the city. They tend to be one-offs and they tend to rent for less, like this property does. So we've used a lower rent comparable table with an weighted average between $12 and $14 to represent this property. Page 4 of the brief shows the model workup. Again, 1,972 square feet of leasable area. We're modeling this one down all the way at $11.24, like I said, to represent the quality and condition. And a capitalization rate of 7.4%. Again, I think representing the older age and the condition of the property. Page 5 of my brief has the income value summary, again showing that model workup value of $282,000. And then scrolling to the bottom, our income and expense information, again, because this is owned by the city of Winnipeg, there is a lease in place here. It's for $10.35 a foot net, and it looks like it was signed back in 1978. So it's quite an old lease for a little over $10 a foot. Like I said, representing that this is an older property, the city owns it. They're looking to get some money off of it. And finally, the COVID questionnaire at the bottom, again, showing no major impact. This is what was provided to us. So that's what I've got. And again, I'll be recommending that the model assessment be maintained today of $282,000. Thank you.
Do I see something about contaminated soil there? Or is it something else?
In the applicant's brief.
Okay, yeah, okay. Mr. Rack, questions of the assessor?
No, thank you.
Linda?
I see you've used a rent of $11.24. Is that just an increase for over time, given that that's such an old lease? Is that what you've done?
Well, that's just what the model's applied. So I haven't tinkered with that at all. I'm showing that they do have that net lease in place at, I think, $10.35. You're absolutely correct that it is an older lease, probably not representative of 2021 market, but our model is about 90 cents higher than what that net lease is. So in my opinion, this is a reasonable model market value.
Okay, thank you.
I thank you. Ian?
I just have a question or two about the net lease as well. You said that it was signed in 1978?
Well, that's what it's showing on the income and expense mailer here. We asked for a lease start date. And from what I can see here, they have indicated June of 78. So that's what I have to go off of. It's quite an old building.
So is this a 50-year lease or a 45-year lease, or has it done any examination of the conditions of the lease?
It doesn't give the leased end date, so I would suggest that it's fairly open-ended until the city decides that they want to use the land, but that's an assumption on my part.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Nathan, I live around there. I'm wondering about the service station itself. Are we just talking about the service station land there, or you're talking about the garden center also?
The garden center is a separate parcel, separate valuation.
That's fine. So the city of Winnipeg owns this land
This
and
land
building? And building?
Yes, and the adjoining parcel as well. So when they,
Yes.
if they
But
are
we're just talking about the service station per se.
that's right.
Okay. And it's being held for future expansion?
That's my understanding. I'd spoken to the applicant about this at the municipal board for a previous cycle. I believe that's what they'd indicated, and that makes sense to me in looking at this and the fact that the adjoining parcel is also owned by the city and where it's located. It makes sense to me.
All right. Mr. Rack, your presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just have to make a comment that the owner fills that out as that's originally when he took the property, was in 78. The rent goes up about every 3 years. I don't have I could send you the income and expense mailers from previous years that shows that the rent is going up. That was just the initial start date of when he moved in. So he's been in that property since 78. But the rent does increase because he's called me about the increases and asked if they're reasonable, and I always told him they were. So first page, you'll see the property is actually in original condition, exactly original condition. The city actually doesn't want him to do any kind of renovations or do anything to the building whatsoever, except just to keep it going. So it is on the Manitoba contaminated list. And as you'll see on page 1 that I did speak to someone from the government about this, and basically they've put a number of boreholes into the ground. You'll see on the first page there where that truck is, that's where the tanks used to be. And the present owner, he's taken over that station since 78. He actually lived in the area. I lived in that area too. And his father knew the guy who actually built that station, and he would tell stories of, because he'd hang around there, that was his dad's best friend, where they'd empty oil tanks into the front end loader bucket and just drive behind the building and actually dump it into the soil behind the building. So that's why it's contaminated, plus the old pumps. So this is the municipal board, the assessor brought up this in the fact that it's on the impacted list. And he said it's no longer on the impacted list, but this is actually information current. I went and looked again, and it's still on the impacted list. And you'll see there's a screen capture there in Henderson Highway. It's actually, that list is actually hundreds of basically properties long. It gets on the list to basically show that there's been impact. They don't know how severe the impact is, but it's on the list because there is contamination. Now, whether or not that contamination has to be remediated, they would have to go further and make more further soil samples to determine that. So if you look on page 3, you'll see that's the front entrance of the building. That's pretty well original concrete floor on the entranceway. That's the original little basically bench there, the cash register. You can see what the sink looks like. Then there's another picture of the just before the washroom. You can see it's basically an all original building. Nothing's been done to it. If you continue on, actually the actual net rent is $10.50 a square foot. Apartment's using $11.23, not far off. But basically where the contamination is, and I'll go further, is to show as it had 4 gas pumps and was built. It had the old, I remember going there, because he's a friend of mine, get my car fixed. And originally there were hydraulic style hoists that came out of the ground. And that is where, talking to the representative from the government, that's basically where a lot of them have contamination, because the hydraulic oil leaks from the cylinder into the ground, like 8 feet and 6, 7 feet into the ground. And it was just typical just to keep adding fluid, because that cylinder is, you can't take that cylinder out. It has been removed and that it has been capped off, but nothing has been cleaned up. So the contamination is basically from the hoists and the gas tanks leaking. So as stated before, there were boreholes drilled into the ground, and they kind of call it a sniff test, where they basically take air samples to determine whether or not there's contamination or not. Most gas stations built in this era are contaminated. They just don't know how severe they are. So they're just put on the list for further hold, so that people, if they were looking to buy the property and to do something with the property, then they would know it's contaminated. For example, if both those properties with the garden center next door were purchased and the use was changed, you would put any kind of a retail unit on there, an apartment, it would have to be cleaned up. That's a fact, that the change of use, you would have to be clean it up. So here's, you'll see there's a board order for 197 Watt Street from 2018. And for 2020, the board reduced it again by the same amount. So the assessor at the time knew that the property was contaminated and used a 10.5% cap rate due to the contamination. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to apply a 10.5% cap rate to the department's parameters. And you'll see the board order below on the same property that the department or the board actually reduced it due to the contamination last round. So basically, excuse me, I'm doing the same thing. So my calculation there is 1072 a square foot, which my computer worked it out at 1072. Basically applying all the parameters on a 10.5% cap rate. I'm looking for 186,000, and in 2020 I asked for 186,000, but there was actually an error in the rent, and the rent was actually lower. But I'm asking for the same amount today. So if you go down to page 8, you'll see there's basically, that's the site I got it off of, contaminated list. And there's an impact, then a designated impact site. And basically the impact site basically says that there is some kind of impact, some kind of contamination, but it's not listed as totally contaminated. Once it hits that designation that it's a contaminated site, 100%, then it's impossible to sell and it has to be remediated. There's only a few actually designated as such. This site is actually designated as impacted because there is evidence of contamination. And if you go down to page 11, you'll see that this is for the 197 Watt Street. This was the bill for contaminated, for that site being contaminated, 450,000. And you'll see the last page is that the phase 3 environmental assessment of pension. This is actually, as you see, it's one of 124 pages. This report cost that owner $34,000 to put that together when everything was said and done. So I'm asking for 10.5% cap rate, which will reduce the building by about $100,000. So it would be it'd be very easy to come up with $100,000 worth of contaminated remediation that would have to happen to the property. That would be very easy to come up with. If the minimum would be that, I mean, you'd have to basically jackhammer all that concrete out where the tanks were and remediate that soil. You'd have to remediate inside the building. For the city, leaving it the way it is for expansion for the Chief Peguis, they wouldn't have to remediate that site. They could just basically pave over what's happening there. It's change in use that would impact that site. So that's my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
And thank you. Mr. Cutler, questions of Mr. Reck?
Please. So we have three different lists here that you're using, Lyle, right? The contaminated sites list, the impacted sites list, and then the list of all sites. That's what the province categorizes currently, right?
That's correct.
So this property is found only on the list of all sites, the sites where some type of information has been submitted to the department and a file has been created. These can include sites where impacts do not pose a concern, remediation has been completed, and further action is necessary, correct?
That's correct. It's basically on that site. And basically, because it's on that site, it's listed as that there's a concern there that there's some kind of contamination. To go any further, there would have to be further study. You'd have to spend, like, put it this way, if it was owned by the tenant and he wanted to sell it, he would have to get a company like Pynchon to come in and drill a whole bunch of new holes and determine what extent the contamination is. The government does the first initial tests to determine whether there's contamination or not. And this site does have, it's impacted by some sort of contamination. So basically, after that point, it's up to the owner of the property to spend the money to go any further. So because it's on the list, most gas stations, old gas stations in the city are on the list because there is some kind of contamination. It needs further study to determine what has to be done to cure it or whether it could stay the way it is.
I'm correct in saying then that no further study has been done on this property. It's on the same list as all former gas stations that get put on the list where there may be some contamination, there may not be contamination, correct?
That's incorrect. If you're on the list, the only way to get on the list if there is that there is some kind of contamination. They wouldn't put you on the list if there's no contamination. They're put on the list because the government has come in, done test holes, and they have determined there is contamination. So to determine how bad that contamination is, then it's up to the property owner to determine that. So the property owner has to go out and hire an independent company that the government recognizes to determine what the total contamination is.
Why do you think that?
I've shown below that basically for the comparable is that contamination was $450,000. So we don't know how bad the contamination is today, but we do know that there is contamination. Otherwise, you wouldn't be on the site.
So why do you think the city of Winnipeg has never bothered to do one of these contamination analysis reports, Lyle?
Because the city, if they're keeping it for expansion of the Chief Peguis Trail, then they don't have to worry about contamination. They can basically, I think they might have to get it maybe tested further, but it may be that even with the contamination, because you're basically paving over with a street, you may not have to fix it. And basically the city is not going to do anything to the property until they make that decision as to whether to sell it or not. Now, if the city decided one day that they're going to sell that property, if they sold it and the tenant that's in there now bought it, he could buy it and just keep running it as a gas station for now. But if he went to basically do anything to that site, if someone wanted to buy the garden center next door and combine the property and put a strip mall, now you would have to get it further tested. And at that point, you might have to spend $30,000 to get the test. And at the end of the test, depending what they find, it might go on to the total contaminated site in which you'd have to remediate it. But you definitely have to spend, maybe, I have no idea, but you'd have to spend an awful lot of money to have that site tested before you sold it.
If the site's never been
that site, go ahead.
If the site hasn't been tested, how are you saying there's definitely contamination here?
Well, the site has been tested. It's been tested by the provincial government. That's how it got onto the list. The only way it gets on the list is if it's tested. And I talked to Raymond from the government. That's why I have the email there. And basically, he's from the Contaminated Sites Coordinator, and he told me that they have that basically there is contamination. That's how it got on that list. They've done borehole samples, and they've gone and taken air samples, and that's how it got on the list. If it wasn't contaminated, it wouldn't be on the list. We just don't know today how badly it's contaminated.
There are sites on this list that aren't contaminated. It says in your description that you've included, this includes sites where remediation has already been completed.
Everything on this list is contaminated because it's a contaminated site. They just don't know to what degree it's contaminated. That's why it's on the site.
Wow, the heading of this is not the contaminated sites list.
It's an impacted site list. A contaminated, if you go on the government's website and you see contaminated sites, there's about 5 of them on there. That's it. Because those ones have been totally tested, and they've got all the results from like pension, and they know the extent. This is a list of impacted sites. So they're designated as impacted because they've tested them and there's something going on. They don't know exactly what is going on, but there's something going on as far as their test, and that's why they're on the site.
Okay, I don't have any other questions. Thank you.
I thank you. Ms. McFadden.
No, I think my question has been answered.
Ian, any questions?
I do, with respect to the contamination or the site that you've alluded to. I'm looking at page 1 of your brief, as well as I guess the top of page 2, and it looks as though the director of the or his signature block is reproduced below that, the contaminated sites coordinator, and the date that the email was sent is the June 27th, but I don't have any of the body of the email, just a name and a reproduced signature block. Was that a mistake, or is there supposed to be a body of an email there?
There was a body of an email. All it said was that if you wanted a copy of the information they had, you have to send them $180 to get a copy of what they found. And I didn't do that. I wasn't interested in to know exactly what the chemical breakdown is, of what they found.
Okay, so we don't know exactly. We don't know exactly what they found, or the degree of contamination then. Is that fair?
That's what I'm stating. We don't know the degree of contamination, but we know it is contaminated.
Okay.
We just don't know how bad.
Okay, but the 197 Watt Street, I guess it's fair to say from the page 12 and 13 and the report, we do know the degree of contamination of Watt Street. Would that be fair to say? Or at least we could discover it.
That's fair to say. And as I stated, that the owner told me he paid $34,000 for that. So being owned by the city of Winnipeg, it would be the city's responsibility to do further tests. And I don't think they'd be interested in doing that, since, as I stated, that I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that if you just paved over that with a street, they wouldn't have to remediate the site. Remediation comes after the fact. If it has to be remediated, like the big thing is if you change the use, if you rip down that building and wanted to build a strip mall, now you have to go and spend $34,000. That's what that site gives you the information for, is that because it's on that list, you couldn't go ahead and build a new building on there, or an apartment or a strip mall. You would have to prove to the government what the degree of contamination is, or whether or not it has to be cleaned up, and to what extent. Maybe it doesn't have to be cleaned up. We don't know. But what I know by gas stations with the hoists and the tanks is they would have to do further testing. And that, minimum, that I don't know what it would cost you, but it would be an awful lot of money to find out what's going on. And then once you know what's going on, then you're committed to cleaning it up, or you can leave it. But that would impact the sale of that property. The fact that it's on that list
might impact it. Okay. Anyway, I have nothing further. Thank you. No, I have nothing further. Thank you.
Linda.
So just to be clear, the Watt Street property They've already spent the $34,000. They know it's contaminated. They know they have to do remediation. And that's why the 10.5 has been applied. In this case, we don't know the degree of the remediation that's needed, or even if remediation is needed. You still have to spend the $34,000, but you don't really know if you've got expenditure beyond that. Am I understanding that correctly, Rob?
Yes, that's correct. You wouldn't know
Okay.
exactly what has to be done until you do it. I mean, but
Okay.
from the stories, the fact that it has those old hoists, that ground that's inside, like the old hoist used to be like a big tube that came out of the ground, and it went, like 7 feet into the ground. So where those hoists are would definitely have to be cleaned up, because they basically leaked for decades. Then we've got the front area where the tanks are. Who knows, whether those tanks leak, but you are correct. We don't know exactly what has to be done, the extent of what has to be done. All we know is it has to be further investigated.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Either party wants submission?
No,
Nope.
Okay. We'll go on to 1384 Regent Avenue West. Mr. Assessor, whenever you're ready.
okay. This is file number 22-3739, roll number 0900-757-0900, street address 1384 Regent Avenue West. So this is the Starlight Auto Mall. It's a little bit different than the other properties we've discussed previously. We do have it categorized as commercial vehicle service related, so you'll see some similarities in terms of our model value here. It's multiple buildings, multiple premises. We have 9 premises on file, I think spread out between 8 buildings here. A land area of 145,000 square feet and a 2023 model value of $5,803,000. Page 2 of my brief, you can get an idea of what we're looking at here. So this is the big parcel on the corner of Regent and Owen Street. It's mostly vehicle service related. As I said, there's one restaurant that we have categorized differently, but the rest are all vehicle service. Page 3 of my brief, again, more photos. You can get a better idea of the layout here in case you're unfamiliar with the area. There are super lubes here, as well as variations of super lubes, which we'll get into when we get to the income and expense mailer. I provided the same comparables rent table on page 4 here that you've seen before, as well as another photo. You can see the restaurant there on the right side. That's George's, I believe, facing out onto Regent Avenue. Page 5 of my brief, I've provided just a general restaurant comparables table here, showing an average rental rate of a little over $30 a foot. The restaurant that's in place here appears to be in fairly good condition. I don't think it should be anywhere below the average, at least. Page 6 of my brief has the restaurant workup. So it's showing the leasable area of the restaurant, 2,131 square feet at a modeled rental rate of $24.88. Just for reference, I think there's a rental rate in place of about $22 for this restaurant. So the model, I think, is about $2 high. 6% vacancy for the restaurant, 3% expenses, an $8 shortfall, and a capitalization rate of 5.7%. Is giving an estimated market value of $830,000 for that stream. And then the second stream here is the vehicle service garage. This is the remainder of the premises here. Remember I said there was 9 in total, I believe. So there's 8 here and then the 1 restaurant, so that's correct. Total leasable area we have on file is 23,267 square feet for the vehicle service garages. The vacancy at 2%, expenses at 3%, shortfall of $6, and a capitalization rate of 7.65%. Gives a market value for stream number 2 of $4,973,000. And then page 8 shows those two streams combined together, which is how we derive that model value of $5,803,000. Moving on through the brief, page 9 and 10 is our capitalization rates and our municipal act excerpts. Eventually we get to our income and expense mailer. It's not the most reliable income and expense mailer. They're calling them semi-gross leases. Some of them are arm's length, some of them aren't. It's owned by the same Superlube umbrella, I believe, that we've been discussing today. So Superlube, Super Tune and Brake, Super Transmission, and Super Shine, I believe, are all owner-occupied spaces. And then the others, things like Connor Auto and Miracle Dent, are more of those, like I discussed, those mom and pop type vehicle service garages. And then Original George's at the bottom there is the restaurant. Like I said, I think it was renting at around $22 a foot. The big issue with this property, before I get into that, I'll just say the COVID questionnaire is also included at the bottom, same as all the other ones that were submitted, no impacts of note. We have a square footage discrepancy with this this collection of properties, I guess you should say collection of buildings. They're reporting around 21,000 square feet, I believe, and we're modeling higher than that. I did my best to try and break it down yesterday before getting here after reviewing the evidence, and I think our square footage is including some basement area, but not that much, as well as some other things that might need to be cleaned up through the inspection process. So in reviewing the income and expense mailers, I think their square footage has been reported fairly consistently. So what I'm proposing today is the square footage supplied by the applicant, which is 18,881 square feet for the vehicle service garage. And then I think a total of 21,041 square feet once you include the restaurant. It's the same that Mr. Rack has used. And using that square footage and effectively our rates, our model rates, and I came to a value of $4,866,000, which I'm going to be recommending today as a revised assessment or revised market value in consideration largely of the square footage discrepancy. Thank you.
Nathan, can you give us that figure again?
4,866,000, 4866. So that's using the square footage reported, the actual model restaurant value of 830,000 added to that value. So 18,881 square feet of vehicle service garage at an average rate of $17.33. And then the rest is all standard model with the 2% vacancy, the 3% expenses, the $6 shortfall, and the capitalization rate here of 7.65% applied to that vehicle service garage stream.
I thank you. Mr. Rack, questions?
Okay.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. And the questions?
So your recommendation, the 4,866,000, is that the total or is that just the vehicle service? And you add
That's total.
That's total? So
Yes.
Sorry, could you tell me the vehicle service garage again, the new number?
4,036,000.
Thank you. Thank you, that's all.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Mr. Rack, your presentation, or are you in agreement?
I'm not in agreement, Mr. Chairman.
All right,
I'll
your
just
presentation.
present my evidence. Okay. So here, page 1, you'll see the picture of the outside mall, auto mall. It's again, it's all owned by the same company, Baruso Brothers, from the other properties. And you'll see on page 1 that it went up 45% from what it was assessed at before. I think that's quite extreme. So if you go to page 2, the model service garages, basically the department's using $17.33 a square foot for all of them. And as I said, it's gone up 45%, which is a tremendous amount in that kind of in the 3 years. Usually between assessment cycles, they don't have that type of increase. So the assessors already talked about the areas, so we won't get into that. Basically, from the other briefs, we've seen that basically the lube space in the basement has been removed, which I believe the assessor's done. So if you go to page 3, you'll see basically this is a picture of the complex. And it's all, I've numbered them all so you know what building basically we're talking about. The owner had tried to rent out building number 3. There used to be a Nissan dealership in there, and a Vickers Chevrolet was in their detail shop. They moved out a couple of years back, and the owner tried to rent that out. He couldn't rent it out. So basically, he took it over and made a detail shop himself, Super Shine, because he couldn't rent it. So if you keep going down to page 3, you'll see pictures of the lube center. You keep going down, it shows building 4, that's original George's. And then building 3 has a Super Shine, and then the vacant space. You keep going down, you'll see where Super Transmission is. There's the Miracle Dent, and basically Enterprise. Enterprise is slightly higher rent because 50% of the building is actually office. They only use that to wash cars. So if you keep going down, you'll see the bottom of page 5 is basically the lease is a semi-gross. They don't recover a lot. On the bottom there, you'll see that they basically recover $5.75 a square foot. That doesn't cover all the expenses, but basically they're recovering almost all of them. If you keep going down, you'll see that basically it shows the leases, and the leases haven't changed much over the years, just a little bit. So basically, there's some comparisons that I've used before. Page 7, and you'll see that Enterprise has a large area built out as an office, so that's higher. So the garage valuation, you'll see on page 8, as the Super Lube and everything that's highlighted is basically, you'll see the book rent on the right for Super Lube was $7.94. I bumped that up to $14. You're looking at basically the Super Tune and Brake was at $8 book rent. That's gone up to $14. You basically got Super Trans. I bumped that up from $8.10 to up to $14, and then the Super Shine, I bumped that up to $14. And then the vacant space, I use $14, and those are semi-gross rents. They recover almost everything, but not all. So those are basically the semi-gross rents for all the places, and my adjustments for the owner-occupied space based on the 3 that are already in there. Like I say, the Enterprise is at 16, number 3, because they are 50% of it's basically office. And then the number 4, the auto there is at 14, and then Miracle Den is at 12. So if you keep going down, you'll see the expenses. So I've adjusted the expenses. I've taken professional fees from $27,000 to $464, and I bumped that down to $45.23. That's what the accounting fees for that particular property are. So we're getting, excuse me, so we're getting expenses at about $7.79 a square foot. So it's not recovering everything, even though there is recovery. If you go below that, the expenses that I've used are calculated on 21,041 square feet, which includes a restaurant. So you got a semi-gross on the chart at 263,340. There's 108,565 of recoveries. You're getting a total semi-gross rent of 371,905. And so you're getting basically expenses just on the garages. It's $779 a square foot to come up with 147,083. So you subtract the two and you're getting a potential income of 224,822, which is actually $10.68 a square foot. So I'm going to apply, if you keep going down to the next page, I'm going to apply $13 per square foot. A little higher than that based on the comparables I've shown. And running it through the parameters, I'm getting the garages are worth $3,020,000. The restaurant is basically, I would say that it's basically at market. It's not a fancy restaurant. It's, I mean, it's just a guy who's rented it for himself as a restaurant. It's not a high-end restaurant of any kind. So you're getting a semi-gross rent of $22.78. Then you get the recoveries, $12,420 to get a total of $61,632. So the expenses taken off at $779 overall, you're getting a potential income of $44,806. So if you go to the bottom of the page, or you go to the next page of the actual calculation workup. So in essence, the owner's getting $20.74 net for the restaurant. So running it through the parameters, I'm getting $698,000 for that restaurant. So I'm looking for a total value of $3,719,000 for the entire property. And then below is just pictures of the comparables. And then there's some information about not including the basement space, but the assessors already addressed that fact for the area. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. Questions of Mr. Rack?
No questions, thank you.
Linda?
No question, thank you.
Ian?
No questions, thank you.
Summation, either party?
No summation.
No.
Okay. Let's go on to the last one on the docket, which is 1010 Arlington Street. And I understand there's rebuttal on there, so we'll deal with that as we go along. Mr. Assessor, whenever you're ready.
File number 22-3751, roll number 13070542000, street address 1010 Arlington Street. This is our final commercial vehicle service related property of the day, constructed in 1960, but we have an effective age of 1999, showing that there has been quite a bit of work done to the building. It doesn't show as a 1960s building anymore. We have leasable area of 22,004 square feet, which I believe is the same as the applicant, and a 2023 model driven assessment of $2,606,000, which I'll be recommending today. Page 2 of the brief shows no recent sales to go off of, unfortunately, for this one. Do have a couple photos. Like I said, it doesn't look like a 1960s building. It's quite large. I think I've stated the leasable area already at 22,004 square feet, so quite a bit larger than the other properties we've discussed today. I provided our inferior rent tables for this one, again, showing our averages between about $12 and $14. Our best comparable here would probably be 1870 King Edward, given that it's about 17,000 square feet, closer to the subject. And that one was renting for a little over $10 a foot, signed back in 2019. Page 5 of the brief has our income value workup. A rental rate here, $12.21. Again, it's not a high-end vehicle service garage or anything like that, and it is also quite a bit larger. So I think that's pushing down our model rent per square foot value there. The rest of it here is standardized, 2% vacancy, 3% expenses, $6 shortfall, and a capitalization rate of 9.7%, which is quite high given the aging condition of the building, in my opinion. But that's what we have modeled here, and that's what's giving us our value of $2,606,000. Our capitalization rates and municipal act excerpts here are all found as usual. This property, yeah, so it's not owner occupied, but they do state right on here that it's not an arm's length tenancy. So it's kind of in between, I suppose. So we can't use, they don't even provide a rental rate, but there's no site specific income to use. So we are relying on our comparables for this property. They filled out the COVID questionnaire like everyone else. They said that there was some minor impact, but then don't describe any impact from COVID-19. So that's all the information I have on this one. And again, I'll be recommending that model value $2,606,000 be maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rack, questions?
Yes, can you look at page 2, the picture of the building?
Yep.
Would you agree the building is more like a warehouse configuration than a service garage, just because it's so square and it doesn't have a whole bunch of doors on the front of it?
I would say the building is large and rectangular. I haven't been inside the building, so I can't say how it's configured inside. It doesn't look like a super loop.
That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. Linda, questions?
No questions, thank you.
Ian, questions?
No questions for me, thank you.
Okay. Nathan, the cap rate of 9.70 seems to be quite high.
If I were given this a fresh look, I would say the rate per foot is probably on the higher end, and the capitalization rate is probably on the higher end as well. So in terms of value repercussions, I'm not sure how that would shake out. But like I said, I think our best comp here is probably the 17,909 square foot one, which was coming in at a little over $10 a foot. And I'm not really aware of any sales to substantiate a 9.7% cap rate. So I mean, if I were giving it a fresh look, I would probably bring that down. I don't have any alternative number or anything for you prepared today, though. We're just recommending that the model value be maintained. So they're just kind of my thoughts on the rates that were produced here.
Okay, I thank you, sir. Mr. Rack, your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you look on page 1, there's 3 pictures of the building. The building is more like a flex warehouse. It's not like a service garage. As you notice, the other properties we've had, service garages are wide and very shallow with a whole bunch of doors on the front because cars go in and out numerous times in a day. This isn't the service garage. It's more like a warehouse. There are no hoists inside. Vehicles go in there to get repaired. They're in there for days. So it's not really a service garage. I don't know why they code it as a service garage. So if you keep going down to page 2, you'll see the difference. Like page 2 shows you what a service garage is. Like those are service garages. They have doors at the front, and actually, as you can see to the building, they actually have doors at the back also. So on page 2, you're getting examples of what service garages look like. And the new service garages are actually like 2 cars deep, so that you can have cars come in from the back and cars come in from the front. And the page 2 and going on to page 3. So you'll see they're not, the subject property isn't a service garage, but it's coded as service garage. And actually, if you look, you'll see the property's gone up 49%, which again is an awful lot for 3 years, especially with the pandemic happening. That seems like 49%. Industrial properties usually go up about 12 to 14% year after year, although the city has stopped supplying a lot of those kind of statistics. So you keep going down to page 5. You'll see we had another body shop in appeal this year, 983 Wall Street, which is Mako Auto Body, and you'll see it's coded as a storage warehouse, because that's basically what it is. It's open inside. There's no hoist. There's only one door, two doors to get in and out of the building. And you'll go, that's the income and expense questionnaire for that property. You'll see that the actual property is only netting $5.46 per square foot. I asked the board to raise the $6, and the board did this year. So now if we're looking at comparisons, and these are the department's using 1221, that's an increase in rent from $7.50 the previous round to 1221 this round. That's an unreasonable increase. So these are some comparisons. So you're getting Bentall, higher ceilings, but same kind of warehouse at $650. You can see the back's just got a few doors. You get Church at 26,729 square feet. It's a multiple tenant building at $595. Same kind of location, Church to Arlington. And you'll see at the back of that building, there's a few doors to get in. Same kind of facility. 1141 Fife to 12,535 square feet at $550, which would be quite similar. You're getting the Paramount is higher ceiling, 24,000 square feet at $6. Again, it's like a warehouse, but just has a couple doors to get in. You got Bannister at 12,000 at $6. And now we have below here on page, just going on to page 9, you see the assessor's comparables for another property we had in this round. Basically, 925 Key Waiton was 32,376. It's the same kind of building, a little higher ceilings. There's a repair shop on the right, and with that canopy, which is actually retail. But basically, getting the same kind of building you could use as a body shop, and that was at $650. If you go down, another one of the assessors comparables is 1313 King Edward. Better location, 28,900 square feet at $775. But if you look at that property, that's one door in. And basically, I think that's the best comparable to the subject property. Is the ceilings are slightly higher, but I'd say that's pretty similar to the basically assessor's property. So we're getting below on page 10 is the basically a summation of all these. So you're getting the assessor's comparables, and you're getting the comparables I've come up with for storage warehouses, similar sizes, at $6.28 a square foot. I think the King Edward property is pretty good at $775. And the last go round, there was actually a certificate agreement for the business assessment at $750. So using $775, I think, is reasonable. Using the parameters, I'm getting a value of $1,644,000. Below that are the assessor's comparables for the Mako Body Shop at a hearing. So you're getting an average of $6.20. So I'm asking for over $1 more. And the value difference is the cap rate was increased from $865 to $970. That changes the valuation. I'm sure the city knows what it's doing to come up with that cap rate. And basically the rent increases I'm using is from $750 to $775. Then we've got below some comparable sales. Both of these buildings can be used at a body shop. We got 33 Stapleton Avenue, sold for $62.20 a square foot, which would make it the subject property worth $1.57 million. And then the one in Century is actually a really good comparable. It's the same kind of building, a little higher ceilings, but still got the flex warehouse style with the doors at the back. And if you use that building as a comparable and applying it to the subject, you get the subject property worth $1.456 million. And then on the bottom, which I'm not addressing any of these comparables, but basically these are the ones that are used at the body shop that the board recognized as $6 square foot rent. And you'll see when you're coming to flex warehouses, there's a lot to choose from. I mean, there's a lot out there in that $6 to high $5, $6, $6.50 range. So applying $7.50 to the subject property, it's a little newer. It's basically a flex warehouse. It's not a service garage, and I'm asking the board to recognize that $7.75 is a good market rent for an owner-occupied property with the comparables, assessors comparables, and with the sales I have. And that's my presentation, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. Mr. Assessor, questions?
Yes, thank you. Lyle, do you have any photos, any evidence, anything of what the inside of this building looks like? It looks like it's been renovated quite well on the outside.
The inside is, the building's pretty well original. I mean, they have painted the outside of that. They did redo the offices. If you look at the page 1, up until where you see a guy standing there by the door on the right, across the front of that is that little area there. It's all office space. That's been painted and that's been fixed up. But the inside of the building is pretty well all original. It's just concrete block walls, flat concrete floors. Nothing has really been done to the building inside. I mean, it's a body shop, so you can imagine how dirty it gets.
Your main comparable here, I guess, Marco's, because that's the only warehouse that you're providing that works on cars, correct?
Basically, Mako Auto Body is a storage warehouse.
Yeah, so they don't do
basically body shops are basically warehouses, or most of them are like a flex warehouse, almost flex, where a percentage of that is actually office space.
So the subject property you're saying is more like a flex warehouse than a vehicle service garage, even though they fix cars in this garage.
Well, basically, service garages, you've seen examples of the service garages I've got on page 2. Now you have to, basically, a body shop doesn't service cars. If you look at Fountain Tire and the Goodyear, the Super Lubes and the Maxim Muffler, there's a whole bunch of doors. There's doors in the front and doors on the back. So what happens is people come in, they need tires, they need brakes, they need an oil change, they maybe need the computer reflashed, they need something fixed. That's why there's so many doors, because vehicles are brought in and taken out. So they're servicing the vehicle. An actual body shop doesn't service a vehicle, it repairs it. If you see in the top picture on page 1, it's Winters Collision Repair. They don't service things. The only time you're bringing your car into a body shop is when it's smashed up. So they're not servicing it, they're fixing it. So that's why you need a large space, because once the car is brought in, it stays there for days. Sometimes it might be there for weeks when they need parts. So it's got to go into a technician that fixes all the parts. Then it's got to go into another part of the body shop where there's a prep guy who sands it and primers it. Then it's got to go into another part of the shop where there's a paint booth where they paint it. And then it's got to go back to assembly. So it's not the same kind of business. It's not service. In fact, all the things that go on a service garage, you would never do in a body shop. You would never touch fluids. You'd never touch oil or brakes. I grew up around a body shop. My friend, best friend's dad had a body shop, and now he has one and his brother's got one. And basically, those kind of things are tremendously bad when it comes to auto body. Even when you spray silicone on your tires to get that shine, that silicone can wreck paint. So anything to do with service, they do not do in a body shop. They will send it out, because those are contaminants that get in the air and can affect paint. So it's not a service garage, and it's not built the same when you look at the basic pictures of it. There's no hoists in there. It's just open space.
Okay, so you're saying that this isn't a service garage because they repair vehicles instead of doing oil changes and changing tires. That's where you draw the line on service?
Well, that's service. And if you look on page 2, you can see what those buildings look like. I mean, Fountain Tire there, the top's got 4 doors in the front, and I know there's 4 doors in the back. And if you go, because you can see right through on the picture below, you can see light at the back. The Super Lube is the same. It's 2 cars deep. So there's every door in the front you see, there's a door in the back. So that Super Lube has 6 doors in the front and 6 doors in the back. You look at the Maxim muffler, you can see all the hoists and you can see all the doors across the front. That's what a service garage is. It's designed that way so cars can go in for a couple hours or maybe an hour and come back out. The body shop is not designed that way. It's not the same kind of building. You can't make everything a service garage, a warehouse into a service garage, but you can make basically auto body shops. You can set them up in basically warehouses. And as I've shown on the Mako Auto Body, that's basically a storage warehouse. That's been coded by the city as a storage warehouse, which is correct.
You stated multiple times that the rents used to be lower for this. You negotiated this previously, and the rents were in the $7.50, I think.
Yes.
What was the cap rate?
Cap rate was 8.65%.
Okay, so over a percentage lower when you were using those lower rental rates.
That's correct. The city must have, I mean, you guys have a department that basically looks at all these things. There must be sales or something that happened that the department decided that 8.65 was too low and pulled it up to 9.7. I have no evidence to dispute that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Linda, questions of Mr. Rack?
I have no question.
Ian?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Mr. Rack, the last go round, did you represent this property before?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. You have rebuttal?
Yes.
Okay, let's deal with that.
So you're looking on page 1, as you'll see that there's multiple different
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Are we good to go?
Continue.
Okay, so on page 1, you'll see that the areas the assessor is using they're all small, most of them all small areas under 3,000 square feet. So that's going to definitely impact rent for the size. They're all service garages. You have the one large there in King Edward at 1015, but they're all service garages. So if you go to page 2, you will see basically, again, pictures. You'll see that basically the Stadacona one is only 2750 square feet. That's a service garage. You'll go down to the next one, Comp 2. Portage Avenue, that's a service garage. It's definitely not a warehouse style like the subject property. You go to the next comp, page 3, at $12, and then you go to the bottom one, it's basically the Domo. And the Domo is not comparable. It's got gas pumps and it's a service garage. You go to the next comparable, Tony's Academy on Henderson Highway. That's a service garage. And you can see how shallow the building is. They only need enough space to put the car in and have a workbench. That's not like the subject property. You get the next one on St. Mary's. That actually was a motorcycle dealership years ago. 50% of that building is showroom. Well, that's not a real good comparable. And then you get the number 7, Boyce. That used to be a semi-trailer repair shop. Now it's basically they sell cars in there. You go to the next one in King Edward. That's a semi-trailer repair shop. So that's not really comparable, semi-repair shop to the subject property. And then again, you go below and that's another service garage. Very small area, 3,000 square feet. And then you get the bottom one on Pembina Highway. Again, it's a service garage at $9. So I don't think those service garages are comparable to the subject property. That's basically a warehouse. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Cuffer, questions in regards to the rebuttal?
No questions. I think I was pretty clear in identifying which comparable I thought was applicable to this subject. Thanks.
Thank you. Linda,
No question. Thank you.
Ian,
I have no questions. Thank you.
summation? Either party?
No summation.
Okay.
I have a summation, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Lab?
Yeah, I've got just a couple of things to make
Okay.
note of. Yeah, all I want to say is that when the department changed the super loops in those buildings, they took out the basement. For some reason, the rents shot up. I mean, they shot up tremendously. Like for St. Mary's, it went up like $7.37 a square foot. The Portage Avenue one went up $9.83 a square foot, and the Pembina went up $7.39 a square foot. And basically, that's, I guess, the model for the area, and because the area was changed. I don't know whether or not those were overridden by the department because the basement was taken out. But as you can see, the assessor's comparables, he only had the ones he's using at that rate. And obviously you can see from the Arlington property and the Henderson Highway property, there's a lot of service garage rents to choose from. And basically he's got to defend the model. So the three of his comparables are all basically pad leases, and they're owner occupied. And the assessor said they've done research to say that that's not true, but yet I've sent that rebuttal out yesterday at 10 o'clock in the morning. So if he had that information at hand, he could have submitted it as a rebuttal to my rebuttal this morning, but we didn't get any information on that. And I have supplied detailed information from their own websites to show that all those properties are basically owner occupied and they're pad leases. And that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Well, I need to issue a rebuttal because multiple things were just stated that aren't true, unfortunately. We did do company searches on all 5 of the comparables that we provided. None of them are owner-occupied properties. The rebuttal information that Lyle sent in, I received at 8:13 a.m. this morning. So that's why you're not really going to have anything to address it, unfortunately.
That is
summation.
Well, I just have to state that I sent it in yesterday, but I guess you didn't get it till today. But that was sent in yesterday morning. That's too bad you didn't get it earlier.
Mr. Rack, it's policy for the Board of Revision. Any rebuttal is served the day of. So it doesn't matter when you send it in, it's served the day of because it's rebuttal. It's not evidence. The initial evidence, you have a 14-day exchange, at which point either party can produce rebuttal. That rebuttal is released to both parties the day of the hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Nathan, thank you for your presentations. Mr. Rack, thank you for your presentations, and you'll get results very soon. We have heard all the scheduled items, and this hearing is now adjourned. So thank you.
Thank you.
Have a pleasant day.
Thank you.
You too.
You too. We'll take, let's take 5.
Thank you.
If at all longer. No, 5. It's fine. It's 5.